Okay, so hi everybody. I'm Louise Larson. I run August Consulting, and I help families on the road to college. And so this is my June webinar, and I'm going to take a little July-August pause to work on applications. And if there is any pressing news, obviously I can put together a webinar if there's some sort of varsity blues type issue that happens. But I'm going to start with just some kind of news and developments and things going on in the college admissions world. If you have a junior and you want them to take the August SAT, the time to sign up is now, because those seats go fast, especially in the Northeast. High schools aren't open yet, so the amount of the number of schools that are offering the SAT tend to be a little bit more limited than October and November. So if you have a rising senior and you want them to take the August SAT, I would try to get them a seat now. If you have a rising junior, my recommendation is to wait for the new online SAT. So, and another little fun fact, a 72-year-old man graduated from Georgia Gwinnett College with his cinema and media arts degree, and his 99-year-old mother was in attendance. So it's never too late to go to college. There has been a fair amount. The pandemic from 2020, 21, 22, the waitlist activity was so minimal. And I find that in 2023, there's been a lot of waitlist activity. From before the May 1 deposit, it started, it's continued, and it's happened at every level. Really selective schools are going to the wait list, and that creates a domino effect, because they tend to pull kids, offer kids spots, and then that creates spots elsewhere. So the wait list activity is pretty significant this year for compared to what it has been for the past 3 years. And the other thing is, you just need to know that the wait list is also a yield tool. The schools will call you potentially and say, if you're offered a spot, will you come? So they can kind of lock up more enrollment using the waitlist as a yield tool. Columbia University has decided to forego alumni interviews. Now, alumni interviews generally don't hold a lot of weight. This isn't huge news, but I would imagine that more schools might go this way. Alumni interviewing, more than an admissions tool, is often a tool to keep their alumni engaged. So anyway, that's just an interesting thing. I think if Columbia is going that way, more schools might go that way. Student loan payment pause is ending, and federal student loan rates are expected to go over 5%. So if you anticipate using student loans or currently have student loans, that's what's going on with them. The Supreme Court case around affirmative action is expecting, there should be some sort of clarity around that. How does that impact the average person on the ground with a kid applying to college? Not that much. It's a big case, and there's a lot of news around it, but how that impacts an average family is not. There's going to be a lot of headlines about it, but if you have a kid applying to college, it's not going to impact your child personally in a very large way. The financial aid formulas are changing. I thought that they might be pushed off another year, but they are talking about moving ahead with them. That will create they're supposed to be available October 1st. The federal government's pushed it to December 1st, which, if you're applying for early decision and you need to know what your financial aid is, that's going to be a little bit of needs some sorting out. One school, I forget, was it Juniata? One of the schools said, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to admit kids, and they had a plan for their December financial aid. So the New York Times put out an article, turn college admissions on its head. I put all my articles that I think are worth looking at in my Facebook group, Two River College Admissions, and my August Consulting page. So those are always there. And you can, access them there. the New York Times put this article out, like, let's turn college admissions on its head. And it was in conjunction with the Supreme Court ruling that they're expecting to come down. And the thing is, the only people that can really turn college admissions on its head are the colleges. And I don't think they really have an incentive to do so. And I don't think the government's going to come in and dictate how they do holistic admissions, or, it would be wonderful to see this all simplified where it became so that you didn't feel the need to come to a webinar on a Monday night because you knew it was a simple process and you'd be able to figure it out. But the colleges don't really have an incentive to do that. So I also posted an article by Bain about the reality of what the economic situation and the demographics for colleges are. Now, if you are on this webinar and you have like a 10th grader and like a posse of children coming up behind them, you might find that not at the most ultra selective colleges, but moving forward down the road in the coming decade, you might have a lot more power in the marketplace than you realize or that you might feel like you have right now. Because the demographics, if you read the Bain article, are just shifting on the amount of kids that are looking to go to college, on birth rates, and on how all these colleges are going to stay open. So in that vein, there you do hear a lot about like colleges closing, and that is a challenge for sure, because if I have a family friend that had a kid end up at a tiny college with this really little niche program, and the college is closing, and it's a forced transfer, and it's been very, very challenging. So if you find your child really digging in and loving like a tiny little school, you might want to do a little due diligence around their financial well-being, because forced transfer is very challenging. And as much as schools take steps to help, I think they call it teaching out, where you can go to this school, you can go to that school, giving kids pathways out of the closing college, is pretty challenging. And so in the past year, Finlandia University, I think that is in northern Michigan or Minnesota, closed. Cazenovia in upstate New York closed this past year. Paul Smith College outside of Lake Placid in Paul Smith, New York, they're closing, or they're not exactly closing. They're ceasing as a college and going to continue with another type of entity. But that is something to just be aware of in conjunction with the Bain article, where I think families that bring any resources to the table are going to have more choices moving forward. So that is kind of what the latest news is. I did two things. Well, I got all my webinars organized onto, I can never say this with a straight face, onto my YouTube channel, which makes me laugh to even say out loud. But so everything I reference, sometimes like I did a piece on waitlist and financial aid and stuff, it's all in one place under August Consulting College Admissions Solutions or Planning. Anyway, I should know what my channel's called, but I can't think of it right now. So that is like all in one place. So if you know somebody that like needs help, or if you want to look at something, it's all in one place. Everything's there and labeled, and I'll try to add a few more labels to those things to, clarify what exactly each one is. And then, the last thing I will tell you, and I mentioned this on my last one, is I am shepherding my own little child through law school, not law school, like admissions. I am so lost and so stressed. And I am like, and then I have a consultant that I call and book time with, and then after I talked to her, I'm like, oh, thank you so much. This is so great. You've been so helpful. It's like a quagmire of its own. I mean, he's registered for the LSAT, but then we had to like get him like a reservation on his test date that took 2 hours. I mean, it's just, so I'm sharing this to say that like, I understand, like, this isn't that stressful for me, because even if somebody asks me a question and I don't know the answer, I can like, I know where to get it. I know who to call. I can figure it out. But this law school thing is just, oh gosh, if that's how you feel, I'm so sorry. And please, I'm happy to be here to help you, because it's so stressful and it's such a relief to talk to the consultant that I'm working with. So All right, so let me switch pages in my little, okay. So what I wanted to walk people through today was the college admissions cycle from 8th grade through 12th grade and what you want to be aware of. And last month I did an unrecorded session on walking my oldest through this process and the stress and as much as I knew so much, there were so many moments where it was like, oh, what's going to happen? And so I have to start, and I'll be succinct as I tell you this, but when I went back to teaching after being home for quite a while, I had this kid, and he was a senior, and he carried himself with the care and ease of, I don't know what. He was not stressed, and he was a rock star. And I'll be concise in that basically what I came to learn about him was, well, he could have gone to a lot of different colleges and gotten in somewhere potentially quite selective. His dream was to go to Virginia Tech, and that's where he was going. And he got in October, and he never had a moment's stress. And I watched him, and I thought, and then I watched the other 15 seniors like biting their nails and and I said, I want my kid, my biological children, to be relaxed. And then and so if you have an 8th grade parent, if you're an 8th grade parent, when my little 8th grader went to his like spring orientation at his high school, and there was a super knowledgeable woman. He went to, if you're local, he went to RFH, and there was a really knowledgeable head of guidance, and she got up and said in like May of his little 8th grade year, you started your college planning with your course selection in January. And she wasn't wrong, but I just said, oh my gosh, I'm going to come in. I want my kid to be like that kid that went to Virginia Tech, wanted to be relaxed and happy. And so when I took him home that night, I said, listen, I want you worried about that college stuff. And the thing is, when your oldest is in 8th grade, they seem so big, but really he was a little kid. And I showed him the University of Montana because my brother had gone there, and we looked at it online, and they all look great online, and it's a neat place. And we looked at it, and he thought it was really neat. And I said, if you just keep doing what you're doing, I think you could go to the University of Montana. And his jaw dropped. And now I did not know that this little 8th grader was carrying this stress. And I said, if you just keep doing what you're doing, you can probably go to the University of Montana. And his jaw dropped, and his eyes got wide. You think I could get into the University of Montana? And I said, I really do. And he said, I had no idea I could go to the University of Montana. Oh my gosh. And like, I didn't know that this little child was that stressed. He didn't, And so I share this with you to say that if you have an 8th grader, they might think that college is this unattainable thing. And I didn't know that my kid, I just wanted him to kind of set the tone of like, we're going to be kind of relaxed here. We're not going to get crazy. And I didn't know University of Montana takes like 90% of the kids that apply. Like most kids could probably go there, and he is. So anyway, I share that to open this up and say an 8th grader might be more concerned about this than I didn't know he was worried about it. So, okay, so here we go. 8th grade. The biggest things that are going to happen are going to be that you're going to step onto a curricular conveyor belt.
8 through 11, like each grade.
Somebody isn't muted. Okay. So you are going to make a choice around what math they go into and what world language they go into. Now, a reasonably selective college is going to expect 4 years of a world language. So if your child has a choice between French 1 and French 2, and they don't really like French, the smarter money might go into French 1 to be able to sustain 4 years instead of going into French 2, being in a little over your head, trying to struggle through 3 and 4 and say, I don't want to take French 5 senior year. I'm certainly not taking AP. So making that decision around a world language, if you really are on the fence, there's nothing wrong with taking French 1 again, because they don't know. Maybe you didn't get to take French in middle school. As long as you have 4 years That's the bigger, more important question. The math curriculum is the other big choice, and you will have to test. And the math sequence for the uninitiated is algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, pre-calc, and calculus. Now that's 5. So if you start in algebra 1, can't get to calculus unless you take geometry and algebra 2 the same year, which most schools will let you do. So if you don't test into geometry and you really want to have that ability to maybe get to calculus, you can double up. If you go into geometry as a freshman, you're on track to go to calculus. The one thing that I've seen that is a little bit new is these even more advanced curriculums where 8th graders are taking geometry. They're going into algebra 2 as a freshman, pre-calc as a sophomore, calc as a junior. And then what happens? Well, you go into multilinear, you go into variable, but you have to go into something, because I have this one school of a kid that I'm working with that it's like after calculus in 11th grade, you can take AP Stats. Now, AP Stats is a wonderful class and I recommend it, but a lot of schools don't see that as a math. So making a decision around those choices, you start to kind of bake some things into the cake that it might be hard to undo. Smart if you have some sort of visual performing arts elective to take that freshman year and get that out of the way. And the other thing is you want to leave yourself room to accelerate, to advance. So maybe if you take your visual performing art elective and maybe one honors class, and then 10th grade you add an academic elective and maybe 2 honors classes, and you want to add rigor every year and you want to do a little better each year as you go. So that requires kind of knowing your kid and saying, okay, how do we position you with the type of kid and student you are to accelerate each year, doing a little more rigor and a little higher performance. I get kids all the time. They're like, oh my gosh, I love history and I wasn't recommended for honors or whatever. And, sometimes you have to just recommend yourself. If you know you love history and you really wanted to take honors and your 8th grade teacher didn't recommend you, sometimes you recommend yourself. So I wouldn't be shy about recommending yourself if your kid, that's who organically they are. All right, so 9th grade. And I'm going to talk about, my plan here is to talk about this kind of like through the curriculum, through the college planning, and then parenting around some of the stuff. 9th grade. Here's a little secret. I hope there are no kids on this. You've got some room in 9th grade to stumble. Like they're going to be like, okay, 9th grade, like maybe 9th grade wasn't the best, or maybe you had all A's and a C, they're going to forgive 9th grade, but you don't have to tell your kid that. What I would suggest you do is along the way, get them onto some campuses so they can see the climbing wall and the all-you-can-eat ice cream bar. And they're like, oh, this looks kind of fun. Like, this is why I'm going to do my homework and I'm going to go to extra help so I can do well to go to this school. And as you pick courses, you would like to layer on rigor a little more than whatever they did in 9th grade. I mean, layering on rigor for 10th grade as they pick courses in 9th grade. 10th grade is going to be more of the same, doing better, added rigor. The PSAT, no one should be stressed about the PSAT. No one should prep for the PSAT. But what I want them to do is show up, eat breakfast, and try. Because the PSAT can start to give you some important context, like, wow, they did pretty well. Like, if they do some prep for the SAT, this could be a really nice score that might enhance their profile. If you really show up and really try and really don't go well, it doesn't go well. Okay. So it just helps us sort, like, as you start to figure out, like, might this be a college that I could get into? The PSA just gives a little context. When I have kids that come in, they're like, I got a 940, and I'm like, did you try? And they're like, I drew Mickey Mouse ears the whole way through. And I'm like, okay, well, that really doesn't tell us anything. We don't know if you have a 980 or a 1480. So if they can just try. 11th grade, again, little more rigor, a little more higher grades. This is where the opportunity to possibly take an AP comes in. You can take the PSAT in the fall. Spring, you're probably moving into hard testing of the actual SAT or ACT. The only people that might really want to be doing testing in the fall of 11th grade might be like athletes that are looking to get a hard score that they can, PSATs give coaches a range, and that's okay, but might be nice to be like, hey, this is my score. This was different in the SAT2 era. If you are a parent of a high school student, you might remember the SAT2s, which kind of got really phased out during COVID, thank goodness. But you don't have to worry about those anymore. The other thing in 11th grade you will have in the spring of 11th grade in May is AP and IB testing. So if that's in May, maybe you want to take the SAT in March or June. If your kid's taking a slew of APs or IBs, you might want to plan the testing for March or June, because those tend to be in May. 12th grade, you really want to have your applications complete before you go back to school. Senior year grades are very, very important. They're the last thing colleges see in ideally the most rigorous courses that kids are taking. So it's very important that they go in like, this matters. They could possibly still be testing. Testing in the fall of senior year is fine, especially if they're motivated or, for whatever reason, you can still be testing for sure. The other thing in the fall of 12th grade that you will want to be doing is finalizing any decisions that you're making around possibly applying to a binding early decision plan, which there is on my YouTube channel, something about testing, about application plans and what the nuts and bolts of those are, if you don't know. So that is what the curricular decisions are around, college planning. And it's very important because a lot of times kids come to me later in the game and like they drop their world language after 10th grade, or they can't double up on the math. And some decisions have been made that they can't make any adjustments to the curriculum. So that's as you advance a kid through the high school curriculum. In terms of college planning, the one thing that if you really want to walk in senior year with applications drafted and a list of where you anticipate applying, you need to know where you are applying the summer before senior year. So when your 8th grader finishes like their little 8th grade graduation and stuff, you think, well, I have 4 years of high school to figure this out, but you really don't, because if you're applying in the fall of senior year, potentially, you really need to have this done from like the spring of 8th grade to the spring of, say, June of 8th grade to June of junior year. That's 3 years. And this leaves 6 semesters. Colleges are open from the end of August to the beginning of December, and the end of January to the beginning of May. It's not very long. They're open like 7 months a year with students on campus. And so if you have a job, other children, anybody's playing a sport, all of a sudden you're like, when are we getting to these campuses? All of a sudden the whole thing kind of compacts a little bit. Like, when am I going to get to these campuses? You certainly can tour campuses when they're not in session. That's fine. And that's how it has to be sometimes. But if you don't see who's there, if these kids if they're just not your vibe, you need to know that before you go, or certainly before you apply binding early decision. So everything, it might feel like spring of 8th grade is too early, but it really isn't. If like you're driving to the Carolinas, or you're going to a family wedding in Chicago, or you're doing something, like just getting on a couple campuses to see what's what is really worth the time. It doesn't have to be, you're not committing to anything. You're just window shopping. So as you progress through their 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, make it a priority to get on campuses. There isn't going to be this magic time where like, we'll just go, because again, if you have other obligations, if you're not retired and don't, have a private aircraft, it becomes very complicated. The other thing you really have to do is, as you as you start talking more about college and seeing schools and thinking about what might work for your child, you know, be very, very candid about the money component and really know where you stand. Do you qualify for need-based aid? Great. You don't qualify for need-based aid and can't afford $90,000 a year. That means you need to seek out schools that might provide merit scholarships or a more reasonable starting point for the tuition. And I also have a video on that on my YouTube channel on how to sort that out. But you need to work with your child as a unified team to say, this is what's affordable for our family. This is what we think could work. You do not want to wait till like April 28th to say, guess what? You can't go to that school. You got to go to this other school. So working as a unified team. I had a parent one time say, I feel like the FAFSA is like a penalty for my failure to have enough money for college. And I'm like, you know what? You know, it is a faulty system. Nobody failed. It's a faulty system, how they calculate need. So, if you have a child in 9th or 10th grade and they're applying to a private college, there's a very good chance you will see a 9 in front of that tuition number before they graduate, if they go. So, all right. So how do you parent through this? The one thing I will say is it is quite possible that sometime between 9th and 11th grade, your dancer or your soccer player or your band member might have a shift and say, I don't want to do that anymore. And that can feel like the end of the world. Like, but then what will you do? And it cannot feel very good. Like, but you've always been a dancer. We thought, yeah, this is what you do if you're not doing this. And I wouldn't be afraid of that. I would give them the time and space, because a lot of times other doors open up. The other thing that will happen, and it's hard for 9th and 10th graders, and I find that in a lot of high schools right now, post-COVID, they say we've got 72 clubs, but really only a fraction of them are actually really working. They used to have all these clubs. Some of them went by the wayside in COVID, and maybe they're their name or not very much. So give your kid time and space to sort out if they get cut. That's another thing that happens. You know, a kid who was always doing this one sport, 11th grade gets cut, and all of a sudden there's an opening, but see what comes to them. College admissions are always about the college. So it is so important to work every day to create for a student. My mantra for kids is create a fulfilling high school experience every day for yourself, because college admissions might go your way and it might not. Even if everything is just perfect, you still might not get the yes you want. So working on creating an authentically fulfilling high school experience for you is, whatever happens with college admissions, you look back and say, I had a fulfilling high school experience. But if you are generating a fulfilling high school experience, you probably have interesting things to write about, interesting recommendations, interesting things to share. So the last two things I'll say are this. Comparison is the thief of joy, and you might have your 11th grader who's just like, I don't know, sort of okay, seems okay, but your nephew in, Milwaukee is playing varsity and he was named team captain as an 11th grader, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And, don't worry about that. Everybody comes to this in their own way. And so it can be very easy to look at somebody on the outside and think they have it all going on. And maybe they do. And, I hope things go well for them too, but don't worry. Everybody kids bloom in different ways. And the other thing I would just say is that there is a likelihood between 9th and 12th grade that there will be some sort of challenge of some sort. And that will be part of the process. Maybe getting cut from a team, maybe a bad social dynamic, maybe just a struggle to do well or to feel good. So that is the other thing to just be aware, it's rarely is it smooth sailing for 4 years of high school. So I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to share. I will share this, and this is the last thing for 12th grade parents. And I was with a friend who's got a senior, and you think you make your deposit May 1 and whew, done. Thank goodness we're set. And really a whole new set of tasks opens up. You have to submit a writing sample. You need, vaccines that, you need like meningitis. I don't know, like you need, and then you say, oh, I got to get a doctor's appointment, and maybe they can't see your kid till August 1st. And you've got to pick classes and fill out housing requirements and do modules for social behavior and get signed up for orientation, because a lot of schools now do orientations in like June, where you have to come in for 2 or 3 days and do orientation. So if you have a senior, it can be like, okay, great, we've made our deposit, great, but then a whole new set of chores opens up, and I'm actually going to write a little blog post about that, because she got me thinking about that. So what's next after your senior has deposited? So that is everything I wanted to talk about this month. I'm happy to entertain any questions. I will pause for July and August while I'm, I've got my first group of prep school kids are out, and I'm just stalking them like, here we go. This is our week. We're getting it started. So getting going with everybody's Common Apps and the writing and everything. So are there any questions? If anybody wants to put a question in the chat or unmute and ask, feel free. This is recorded and it will be on my YouTube channel in the next 48 hours. So anybody want to ask anything? No? All right. Well, feel free to email me if you do have a question or something comes up. I will get this up, and it's recorded. So if you want the recording, I can email that to you too, if you want to share it with somebody. All right, I am going to stop recording.